Out of the box, Go provides two pretty amazing template libraries, both the text/template library and the HTML/template library. Now, the first of these is intended to be a more general use case package that you can use to create any templates in any language, any context, and it tries to be agnostic to what you're doing. Whereas the HTML template library was specifically designed for creating HTML pages, and as a result, it has some contextual awareness of what sort of code you're writing inside of and where you're expanding values. I know that might not mean a lot, but the short version is that whenever you're inside of HTML, it knows that and it'll evaluate your values intentionally as if they were inside of HTML. And when you're inside of JavaScript or CSS, it will also do the same type of thing. I'll talk a little bit about this later on in this video, but I just want you to have a heads up that that's pretty much the big difference between the two. Aside from that, the way you use them and the way that the actual Go code is used is virtually identical. It's just how they end up rendering that data will change a little bit because they were designed for different purposes. Now you can see that the docs for these both look very, very similar. How you use them in your code, like I said, is basically the same. It's just a difference in how the values get output in your templates. So in my experience, the text/template docs were a little bit better. They had a little bit more information than the HTML/template docs. It wasn't that the HTML template docs were wrong, it was just that the text ones had more info at times. But that might have been changed since I learned about the template package. So I'm telling you that just to sort of give you a heads up that if you're trying to figure out how to use some sort of feature in the templating package and you don't see it in the HTML template docs, I would suggest checking out the text/template docs to see if there's something about it there that'll sort of give you an idea of how you're supposed to use it. So whenever I said that the HTML template package was intended for use with HTML pages, this is because the HTML template package was intended to prevent things like code injection and other stuff like that. So this is the coolest thing in my opinion about the HTML template package, and it's something that not every other template package does, or does in my opinion as well as Go's HTML template package. But it will actually escape characters and do things like that for you. So I'm not going to cover exactly what code injection is in this video. I have a side video that you can watch, and it covers what it is and sort of gives some examples of it. So it's definitely worth checking out if you've never seen code injection. But I will just say that it's a security concern, and it's something that you have to be aware of anytime you're showing user-generated data, because otherwise it could lead to some really bad security issues. Another thing that I want to mention is that because the HTML template package and the text/template package use the same interface to use them, it's very easy especially when you're using auto importers, to import the wrong one. For example, you've seen me coding over here, and if I were to do all right, let's just do template.new blah. So this isn't valid necessarily, but you can see up here that it happened to import the HTML template package. But if I change this to text/template, all of my code is still completely valid. Nothing actually changed. So what it imports is kind of, it's based on whatever the importer you're using or whatever the import manager you're using decides to import out of the two. But you need to go make sure whenever you do this that all of your pages that are building a web application use the HTML template package. Through the rest of this video, I want to walk you through creating your first template. This is going to be an HTML template, and I just want you to see how the HTML template package works and to get a feel for it. So once we've created our template, I'm going to walk you through all of the code to make sure you understand it, and so that, to make sure you know what to expect. But really, before we can sort of get to doing that, I need to delete this line here. Okay, the other thing is I don't want to interfere with any existing code, so I'm going to create an experimental directory. I like to have this directory so that I can put sort of random code inside of it, and that way whenever I'm writing code I can test things out, and it's not really part of my main code. And you can see here that I have the experimental directory here. Now this isn't something that I'll tend to commit to Git. So realistically we could create a gitignore or add to our gitignore file to put this there. I won't be doing that here now because I want it to be available for all of you to follow along with. But if you wanted to, you could do so by going to your gitignore file and copying this temp line, but replacing temp with exp. Now that we have our experimental directory, we're going to create our first template file inside of it. So we need to first cd into the experimental directory. And then we're going to ls in it just to sort of show that there's nothing there. So then we're going to run atom hello.go.html, and this will create the file and open it in our editor. Inside of it, we're going to create some really basic HTML. It's going to have an h1 tag, it's going to say hello, then it's going to put a dynamic variable, the name variable, and then we're going to close the h1 tag. Now you can see here that my editor has already started to do syntax highlighting for both the h1 tags, and it also has syntax highlighting for the name variable, the dynamic portion of our template. Now the name part is the value we're going to insert dynamically, so it's nice to have them highlighted inside of our templates so we can easily pick them out and know where they are. And that is why I actually prefer using the GoHTML extension. Technically you can use whatever you want, the HTML template package doesn't care, but I like to use GoHTML because my editor, Sublime Text, and a couple others automatically pick up this extension and know to use this type of syntax highlighting. So you could set up your editor to use whatever template extension you want, but since I tend to work with other teams and do things like that, it's a lot easier to pick an extension that everybody has already set up so that not everybody has to go set something custom up. It's already sort of set up for them automatically. The next thing that we want to do is create the Go code that will execute this template. So we're going to create a Go file. In this case, we're going to call it main.go, but this is not the same as the existing main.go. This is a main.go inside of the experimental directory. So I'm going to go package main, and I'm just going to save this so you can see that it is over here in the experimental directory. And then I'm going to import, and the first package is the HTML/template package, and then the other package we're going to want is OS. So the OS package will make a little bit more sense here shortly, but for now I don't expect it to make complete sense as to why I'm importing it. So we have the main function here, and this is what's going to be run. So we're going to do t_err equals template.parse files hello.go.html. So what this is doing is I'm calling the template package, and I need to change this to be parse files instead of parse file. So I'm calling the template package, and I'm telling it to run the parse files function, which returns a pointer to a template as the first argument and an error as the second argument. So I can actually, well, it doesn't show it there. It shows it at the bottom of my screen, but it's pretty small, so it might be hard to see. I'm going to go show it to you here because I think this is a little bit easier. So we have parse files here, and you can see that it takes in file names. This is a variadic parameter, which means that it can be as many file names as you want. In our case, we're only passing in one, but it can be as many as you want. So this function takes in the file names and returns a pointer to a template object and an error. So now that we've called this parse files function, it's going to parse this this file name that we give it, and it's going to either return a template or an error depending on what happens. So we first need to check and see if the error is not equal to nil. So if the error is not nil, that means something went wrong and we're just going to panic. I'm going to do the panic here because there's really not any way to recover from this. If the template doesn't parse correctly, this sample application's, it's not going to run anymore. There's nothing useful we can do, so we'll just panic and look at the error. After that, we need to create some data to put inside of our template. So when we go back to our template, you can see that it's looking for a field called name. So that's what this .name means. It means it's looking for a field called name. So we need a type that will, let's call it a user, and it's going to be a struct, and it's going to have a name field, which is going to be a string. So that's what we'll add up here. And I'm going to warn you, this is a little bit different than what I do in the book, but they're both essentially the same thing. They're both using a struct. So we have that user struct, so now we need to create an actual instance of it. So we're going to do data as a user, and we're going to put the name as John Smith. And we'll save that. I think everything's good there. The last thing we want to do is we want to execute our template using this data. So we're going to do err equals t, which is the template that we created up here, dot execute. And the first thing we pass into execute is where we want it to output the executed template. So whenever it takes our template and inserts data, we're telling it where do you want to spit this, the result out. In this case, we want it to do it to os.standardout. So os.standardout is just the output in the terminal. So we're telling it to just print it out to the output of the terminal. And then the data is going to be this data object up here, this user that we created. Now we're going to do one last check and say if the error is not equal to nil. So if it didn't execute the template correctly for some reason, we want to know about it. So we're going to panic in that case with the error. Otherwise, we don't need to do anything else. Otherwise, the template should be printed out to the screen and we are good. So I'm going to save that. There are no errors. So we should be good to run this code. So you can see here that when we run this code, it outputs hello John Smith, all inside of that h1 tag. So I kind of just want to show you how this changes. So I'm going to change John Smith to Bob Barker. And we can run it, and we've got hello Bob Barker. So that's how this is working. Anytime we execute this, it changes it. We can also take this code, copy it. That indentation got a little bit weird, but that's okay. And now we can say data.name equals John Calhoun. So now that we're executing it twice, you'll see here that the first time it'll spit out John Smith, the second time John Calhoun, if I could spell my own name. And this is how templates work really nicely, is they allow us to parse them once. That's what we're doing up top. But then we can execute it with different data each time and it'll spit out the different data. So if we run it, the first time is John Smith, the second time is John Calhoun. So I'm going to go back to the template real quick, and I just want you to look again, and that's this name variable is where it's coming from. It's coming from this user object, but it doesn't have to be a user. This could be a blah object. It could be anything at all, as long as the name does have to be a capital. Have a capital first letter. That's because we need it to be exported so that the template package can access that data. The last thing that I also want to mention is that paths are relative when it comes to parsing files and things like that with the template package. So in this case, I'm saying template.parsefiles and I'm giving it hello.go.html because I am running my code from the same directory that has this hello.go.html file. If I were to cd up a directory, so now I don't have hello.go.html in here because I'm not running it from the same directory. Even if I were to type go run exp/main.go, this is going to error because it can't find the file in the current directory we're running our program from. So this isn't a major issue for us right now. All it basically means is that we can't just run our code from anywhere. We have to run it from somewhere where these HTML templates are, where we expect them to be relative. Throughout most of the book, I'm just going to assume that you're running code from the lenslok.com directory or whatever directory you have all your source code in, except when I tell you to be in the experimental directory, that is. But at the very end of the book, we'll actually look at how we can whenever we go to deploy to production, how we can actually tell it what relative path to use for these things. But I don't want to do that just now because it's kind of overkill and it makes a lot of the code more complicated. So it's easier just to say, go to the directory where your templates are or where your templates are expected to be executed from relative. So by that, I mean, if I go back to lenslok.com, I'm fine with doing exp/hello.go.html here. That is perfectly fine to do this as long as I know I'm going to be running my code from the lenslok directory and not the exp directory. So now I can do go run exp/main.go and this runs completely fine. All right, that's it for just looking at templates and how they work in Go. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit about how the contextual encoding works for the templates.